What's up everybody, Brian from WrestleMap here. Today I wanted to try something a little bit different, a different style of video. I recently got a really cool package that I have been waiting for that came in from Nigeria. Olusesan Olakoya, who works with me on WrestleMap, he has sent some stuff over. One was a very special award, which we'll get to at the end. But along with the award, I got some really cool, I guess, collectibles, magazines, posters, all sorts of cool stuff like that from, you know, Nigerian wrestling history and African pro wrestling history. And I wanted to go over those with you guys today a little bit and do a little bit of an unboxing video, something I haven't really tried before, but let's try something a little bit different. All of these, I guess, documents, memorabilia, all this I did some high quality scans for, and they're up on the WrestleMap website. So you can take a look at all of them in more detail, go through the magazines, the programs, the show posters, all of it. It'll all be available on WrestleMap.com. It is already, and you can take a look at them up there. So I guess we'll just kind of go through, you know, piece by piece a little bit of, you know, what I received, and I'll share some facts that I know about them. I don't necessarily know, you know, everything. There's, of course, still more research to do, but I think some of these are pretty cool to show off. So let's get started. All right, up first, this is from BRF WrestleMania 2011. This was a show that Nigeria Pro Wrestling Federation put on. I know that, and I know, so some of the wrestlers here that are featured, certainly not all of them made it. I know Max Capacity here, he's a US based wrestler who actually has passed away since. He never ended up making it out to Nigeria. There was, I guess, a lot of back and forth talks that, you know, they wanted to bring him out, but it just never materialized. You know, some of the wrestlers that are on here definitely did not make it out, but I know some that did, at least the foreign wrestlers. Chris Bambikiller, Chris Raber from Austria, he did make it out, and there's actually a pretty cool documentary that he has out there on his YouTube from his time that he went out to wrestle in Nigeria for BRF WrestleMania in 2011. It's a pretty cool documentary. Check it out. I'll see, maybe I can provide a link in the description here. I think Michael Kovac went with him. He's also featured here on this poster. As for the other foreign wrestlers that are listed, Julie UK, who actually, if you look closer, that's Sweet Saraya Knight, the mom of, you know, AEW's Saraya, formerly known as Paige. She did not make it out for this show. I don't believe there's any foreign female wrestlers that made it out. Tony Destroyer down here. He, I believe, is the one that wrestled Bambikiller at the show. So, and there is footage of that in Bambikiller's documentary that I mentioned. So, I'll try to get a link up for that in the comments or in the description of the video here, so you can check that out. All right, up next we have, this is a pretty cool poster here. This is from Pro Wrestling Africa, Battle of Yaoundé 2015. This is actually the first ever PWA show, the first Pro Wrestling Africa event where Mr. Peace, Power Lee of Nigeria, went toe-to-toe with Michel Nudem of Cameroon to decide the first ever Pro Wrestling Africa Heavyweight Champion. They would relive this match about, I think it was 6 years later in 2021 in Yaoundé, and this time Michel Nudem would beat Power Lee and become the champion, and a pretty controversial finish, actually. This match, you know, the footage of it has kind of been wiped from the internet, but it was, it turned kind of into a shoot at the end there. And there was kind of a messy finish, but, you know, Michel Nudem did come away as the champion. There's a lot more I could say about that, but I won't get into too much. Basically, you know, kayfabe is very alive in Africa, and, you know, the status of being a champion is very important, especially when, you know, these wrestlers are attempting to get government funding from, you know, from their, obviously their governments, and, you know, meeting with these rulers as the champion is usually kind of like a bonus. You know, see, you know, I'm this prestigious champion, and this is why, you know, getting some of this funding would be helpful to help grow our program, because I can defend against, you know, X, Y, and Z. So, but that was, you know, the very first, that's a pretty historic poster, because Pro Wrestling Africa right now is, I would say, outside of South Africa, is probably the biggest promotion going in Africa, featuring, you know, continental African wrestlers for the most part. And now this one is another throwback Pro Wrestling Africa poster. This is from Return of Glory in Asaba, Nigeria in 2016. This is after Mr. Peace Power Lee has won the Pro Wrestling Africa Championship. I don't know too many details about this event. I know Mr. Peace Power Lee, I know that he did defend his title there. I think it was against Buffalo from Cameroon. Yeah, I'm pretty positive it was against Buffalo from Cameroon at that show. And there's some footage of that online. I'll see if I can track some of that down and maybe throw it in the video or in the description for you guys to check out if you want. All right, this poster, this is a kind of a funny one to me. And in the piece that I put up on WrestleMap, you can kind of check out to see what I wrote on that. This is from the Universal Promotional Wrestling Federation, UPWF, and a tour of Nigeria that they're planning. Ultimate Commander, I believe, is the wrestler who is kind of the head of UPWF. He's a Nigerian wrestler who ended up making the trip to the US, I believe stayed in the US for a while, and was apparently looking at bringing this show to Nigeria. I don't know the fate of this tour as a whole and what happened, if they ended up holding many or any of these shows, but I do know that a lot of the wrestlers who are advertised here certainly did not wrestle in Nigeria during this time period. For example, Bobby Lashley, Sid Vicious, Dolph Ziggler, who was, you know, under WWE contract from 2003 until this year. He certainly was not wrestling in Nigeria for the UPWF. MVP, Val Venus, I don't believe any of these guys, you know, have ever wrestled in Nigeria. The Powers of Pain are listed here. I believe Barbarian did wrestle in Nigeria though. I don't know for sure that it was as a part of this event, but he did make it there at one point. But yeah, I don't know. This one was just kind of funny to me because, you know, obviously not very honest advertising going on here. All right, up next we have the third annual BRF WrestleMania event that Nigeria Pro Wrestling Federation put on. This was the year after Bambi Killer went, I believe. I don't know if he made it back for the second year or not. I'm not totally sure. This year's BRF, though, it looks like they stuck to advertising local wrestlers, more Nigerian wrestlers. I think maybe they did have bigger plans in 2011, and then a lot of the funding probably fell through, is my guess. But there are some cool looks here for wrestlers that I'm not too familiar with from the Nigerian scene. So I'll have to do a little bit more digging and some more research. But for example, Adam Ant Ozegbe with the red face paint, I've never seen him before. Sparkling Angels kind of got a La Parka look. I've never come across him before. And like I said, all these scans are available high quality on WrestleMap.com. So feel free to go in and check them out. Big Fish, I'm not familiar. I've heard the name, but I'm not familiar with him. Looks pretty intimidating. Super Billy Akashili, I like his look. I don't know him at all. Some of these other guys, though, I do know of. For example, like Zion Lion, he's still around today. Banalix Bulldog, he actually wrestles in the UK. Silent Tiger is another one I'm not familiar with. I kind of like that look. Flying Danko, he's still around now. Super King, I don't know Super King, but it looks like he held a cool looking belt at one point. Taya Mupepe, he's from the Congo, but he did participate in Nigerian events and even with Pro Wrestling Africa at times. All right, up next we have, this is the 40th anniversary program from the Nigeria Pro Wrestling Federation's 40th anniversary event. This just took place in 2021. This program is pretty cool. You know, it really is just kind of an event program. It kind of goes over the events of the day. It has an address from the president of the NPWF where he shouts out, you know, some of the greatest wrestlers in the history of Nigeria. Power Mike Bamidele, Power Udi, who is of course a very controversial figure, Ultimate Commander, Laddie the African Tiger, many more. Along with, you know, listing the order of the program here, a list of the awardees, who's going to be presented an award at this event. And then really just the program itself just kind of goes through some dignitaries and sponsors who have kind of stood by the NPWF side throughout the years. This one is John Uche. He's the current president of the NPWF. This one is kind of more, instead of looking at the wrestlers, looking at, you know, sponsors, dignitaries, people that have been on the staff, people that will be getting awards. A cool thing about this program to me, a couple cool things on this page here. One, WrestleMap. We sponsored this event a little bit. We at least sent out a congratulations, and to see it in this program is pretty cool to me. When I was going through it for the first time, I was like, oh, sweet. So that's where that ended up. Nice. And here's Olusesan Olakoya, who is, you know, he works with us here on WrestleMap and is just an awesome historian in terms of pro wrestling in Africa and Nigeria. And on the back side we have just kind of the show poster, which I got a bigger print of that one, so I'll show that off in just a little bit. Next we got, this is just a show poster from, actually this is just a bigger version of the Battle of Yonde 2015. That very first Pro Wrestling Africa event. It's like a full-size poster. I got a couple of them here, it's pretty sweet. I'm gonna have to figure out ways to display some of this stuff. I don't know how yet, or, you know, maybe I'll display one and save the other, kind of just like in a collection. And so, you know, I gotta figure something out. I'd like to build like maybe a little desk, little office, something like that. All right, I got a few more show posters to show off here. This one's a huge full-size one, and this is a kind of a historic one. They're advertising the first ever cage/ladder match in Nigeria. So I can tell you for sure this wasn't the first ever cage match in Nigeria. That happened back in either the late 80s or early 90s. And I did post a link to that match in the page that has like all the high quality scans from this stuff. So if you want to go check out that original cage match from the late 80s, early 90s, it's up on there. You can find it through that post. Some of these wrestlers are really cool and unique to me. Strongbone, he is actually in some of the NPWF stuff that we have available on WrestleMap, so you can check him out in action. I think he's the only one here that is really actively still competing. But Ariba Swan, I'll see his name around sometimes. I still haven't seen him wrestle yet. He may be wrestling in something coming up soon. As you see, he's got a couple title belts. I think he's one of the more popular wrestlers in like the 2000s, mid-2000s range in Nigeria. I get a chuckle out of some of the names. For example, one, I think he's maybe in the ladder match. We have Hulk Macho 316, which is classic, truly classic. There he is, Hulk Macho 316, great name. He was in the apparently national light heavyweight title fight, him and Mr. Olympia. Don't know who came out on top in that one. I don't know like a lot of these results or anything. You know, even just kind of seeing these posters for the first time, this is a, you know, first time thing for me. I don't have you know, results or a lot of research behind kind of what went down at these shows. So this is kind of, you know, leading me down that path to kind of figure out, you know, what happened, what went down. Another interesting wrestler to me, Monkey Man, who I've seen some pictures of Monkey Man around, and he'll usually actually carry a monkey with him. So that's pretty funny. Great gimmick. Okay, I see. So the first ladder match was between MC Original and Ariba Swan. So I don't know the outcome of that match or how that went, but you know, it is something worth looking into. I can see what I can dig up, but otherwise you can take a look at this poster up on the WrestleMap site. Alright, this poster is really cool. This is the oldest poster in the bunch that we have here. This is from 1997. Nigeria Wrestling Federation. You know, now they're known as the NPWF, Nigeria Pro Wrestling Federation. It's the same company. I don't know a lot of these wrestlers, so this is really cool. Getting a look at, you know, who was active in the late 90s in Nigeria. I know a couple of them. Tony Destroyer, for example, he recently passed away this last year. He was African Wrestling Council super heavyweight champion for a long time. Banalux Bulldog, I mentioned him on one of the posters earlier on. He ended up moving to Scotland eventually and wrestling there, I believe. But yeah, this is really cool. You know, we had a women's match. Ige White and Mary Arthur. Yeah, just a lot of wrestlers I don't know. Action Man Tiger Fist, they were competing for the #1 contendership for the NWF National Heavyweight title, which is currently held today by Mighty Man. So, looking back at some of that lineage, you know, I would be curious to know who the champion was at this time. It doesn't look like whoever it is was in action, so maybe this was for a vacant title between these two. But, you know, hard to say without digging a little bit more, but really cool to go back to the late 90s and check out, you know, kind of what's going on in Nigeria then. And then sticking with the return of glory in Asaba in 2016, I also got this cool little program from the event. This kind of goes over, you know, the program of events, gives an explanation of what Pro Wrestling Africa is. Really cool. It has a small version of that poster on the back. Again, this is available in that scan link that I'll put in the comments or in the description here, and it's available on WrestleMap.com. You know, it looks like they had an African light heavyweight title fight there. A Nigerian middleweight title fight. They did a women's match. They had some musical guests. Youngest Baba. I'm not familiar with them. Maybe a Nigerian act, but that's pretty cool. That was at the Indoor Sports Hall in Asaba. Just a small little program for the day. It's cool to have. I think it's really cool to have. Alright, this next, I guess program or journal is maybe the best way to put it. This one is really cool to me. When I first saw it, I was a little confused as to kind of what it was, but now, you know, after looking through all this stuff and scanning it all, this one really sticks out to me. It's from 2017. It's the Nigerian Pro Wrestling Diary 2017. So kind of what this does is it goes through and it has, you know, a daily planner type thing. But along with this daily planner, we get portraits of Nigerian pro wrestlers, and will also list, you know, their birthdays. So it's really cool, like biographical information, and we get kind of, you know, an insight into even more of the Nigerian wrestlers that maybe, you know, have slipped under the radar, weren't maybe top stars, or were kind of in periods of time where, you know, the coverage of Nigeria or the keeping of records outside of Nigeria has, you know, not really existed, and now we kind of get a look into who some of these wrestlers were. Power Udi, of course, everyone loves to talk about Power Udi when it comes to Nigerian pro wrestling. Yeah, I think this one is really cool. This scan is available again on the WrestleMap site. And, you know, you just kind of go through and check out all the wrestlers. I think that it's pretty cool to see some of these guys who I wasn't so familiar with, learning about, you know, some of the new to me wrestlers. It even goes through some who have more or less kind of like disappeared from the scene, you know, a Where Are They Now page. They also have, you know, a second Where Are They Now page. Super Roscoe, he ended up turning back up, so he's been in action as of late. Patrons, promoters, and philanthropists of the past and present in Nigerian wrestling. Women wrestlers that have competed over the years. There's even a spot for departed wrestlers. For example, Super Armstrong, I came across a photo of his. And for the longest time, I didn't know who it was. When I was able to get some of this stuff in and look through some of it, I was able to kind of discover, oh, that's Super Armstrong. There's an older picture of him like holding a title belt, I think from the African Wrestling Council, which is kind of, I think supposed to be like a continental body that predated Pro Wrestling Africa, but that I think ran through like the 70s and 80s, and I'd love to learn a lot more about African Wrestling Council. It's something that I've looked into some, but like it's not really available, you know, online. So I think it's something that I'll have to probably, you know, maybe do some interviews and try to uncover some information that way, which can be difficult, but you know, we'll see. I do know, you know, Tony Destroyer was there. Now I know Super Armstrong was there, and you know, I don't know for sure that Power Mike was, but he is one of, you know, the most well-known legends in Nigerian pro wrestling. And it's, you know, nice to see him featured here in this departed wrestlers section. And again, this whole scan is, you know, available on WrestleMap.com to check out. And I recommend this one. I think this is really cool. Alright, one more poster that actually snuck in here that I didn't, you know, catch it when I was going through the other ones trying to sort this through. This is another Nigeria Pro Wrestling Federation event back from 2007. I guess that was organized partially by Mr. Kicks, who was the national super heavyweight champion of Nigeria at the time. Must have been a big player in Nigeria in kind of the mid-2000s. Again, we see Strongbone. This was, I believe, right before his rise to the top. He was, I believe, the Nigeria Pro Wrestling Federation heavyweight champion at one point. Around this time, maybe 5 or so years later. So this was kind of during his ascent. Power Vic, he's still around. I've seen him every now and then, but otherwise, a lot of these wrestlers I don't really know. I've heard of Big Ben Everest down here. Never seen him in action. The Golden Twins, it's a tag team from the Congo that, you know, they used to tour Nigeria quite often, and you know, I don't know what their status is currently. I don't know if they're active. I haven't seen them necessarily competing in any of the Congolese catch I've been, you know, trying to keep up with, but it's just so vast, like I can't watch it all, you know what I mean? So like, maybe they're still going. It's hard to say. I know that there's some talk about trying to bring them back in for a Pro Wrestling Africa event. At this point, I don't know, you know, how old they are or, you know, what they look like in the ring, anything like that, but, you know, maybe we'll be seeing them again soon. All right, up next we have some Wrestling Update issues. So Wrestling Update was a wrestling newspaper / magazine that was started up by Olusegun Olukoya in 1998. And the whole purpose of it was to cover wrestling in Nigeria and even some international wrestling. I think these are probably the most valuable in terms of, you know, helping to build history and commemorating and memorializing Nigerian and African pro wrestling through the late 90s to mid 2000s, which are kind of the issues that I received. There's a lot of articles in here, so I don't think it would make a ton of sense to kind of go through each issue. So instead, I'm gonna try to point out a couple things that, you know, really stick out to me and that I think are cool and maybe you'd want to check out on your own. because these are all available as part of the scans that I uploaded on WrestleMap. First, we have the very first issue of Wrestling Update from 1998. Ben Lionheart, apparently he was a Nigerian star. He had passed away around this time, unfortunately. Otherwise, it takes a look at, you know, independent wrestling in Nigeria during this time. Really cool. Definitely check that one out. Another Wrestling Update issue. This one's from September 2001. You know, talking about how some international wrestlers were going to be coming to Nigeria. On the back side, we have Power Mike. He's ready to promote. He was a promoter at this time, one of the most famous in Nigerian pro wrestling history, so I'll look into him still being active. He's since passed away, but at that time, he was one of the top promoters in Nigeria. So it's cool to take a look back at, you know, the events he was running and the success he was having. As I said, sometimes they'll get into international stuff, so we see Bam Bam Bigelow, we see Bret Hart. Another Wrestling Update issue, this one in May 2002. Talks about Onita running an event in Afghanistan, which, you know, is, to me, when I first found out about that, it wasn't through this, but it was just like kind of mind-blowing that Onita went to Afghanistan, you know, soon after, you know, 9/11, and kind of at the height of, I believe, the US and Afghanistan war, to put on some wrestling shows. And there's, you know, you can find some photos. I've never found any footage. I don't know that video exists of it. I don't think it does. Bahu FMW would probably be the kind of the main go-to guy to ask on that, but I've never seen it. If it does exist, I would love to see it. I have seen some photos. From what I've seen, they didn't really have like a full ring. It was more something that they were doing on mats and, you know, for, you know, gatherings of fans, and it's just like a really cool piece of historical knowledge to kind of have. Otherwise, you know, a lot of information on just kind of the scene in Africa at this point. Pat Vaughn heading to South Africa from Nigeria. O.C. Muzeze, you know, getting married in the U.S. Even some stuff on Hulk Hogan and Macho Man, who, you know, of course, are still active at the time. The article in here, the same issue, it even has some information on the African Wrestling Council, which I guess is still an active promoting body at this point in 2002, talking about, you know, USA Bing, who he'll still wrestle in Nigeria from time to time, and Taimu Pepe, who we'd mentioned, and, you know, one of them holding the championship, the Cruiserweight Championship in the AWC. So again, this will be something that I'll be able to use to kind of help build some timelines when the time is right for, you know, kind of putting together African Wrestling Council history, if I could do that, or, you know, just the Nigerian history. In May 2002 even has an article on Will Mascaras, the first masked Nigerian wrestler, based his whole gimmick off of Mil Mascaras. He's always been fascinating to, you know, fans from outside of Nigeria, so, you know, check out that scan. If you want to learn some more about Will Mascaras, that's a great place to check it out. And then in this 2002 May issue, again, this is actually the photo that I'd mentioned seeing of Super Armstrong in the past, who I didn't know who it was, and I thought you know, he had such a cool look, and who is this African champion? It's really one of the first photos that I'd come across, showing me kind of like that there was, you know, pro wrestling in Africa back in, you know, the 80s, 70s, 80s, early 90s, and, you know, champions, championship belts, and, you know, who are these wrestlers? And I always thought he looked so intimidating with that look. So, you know, I get to learn a little bit more here about Super Armstrong as well, other than, you know, knowing that he has passed away and he held a title in probably the African Wrestling Council at some point. Wrestling Update, April 2003. Pro wrestling needs government attention. That's something that is still going on to this day in Nigeria. You know, asking the government for help with funds and funding the programs and the promotions and the events. You know, the lack of government funding has always been something that Nigerian pro wrestling, you know, the people involved in administration have always kind of pointed at that as being something that is holding their industry back. it's definitely a story to watch. It seems like it's something that's been going on for about 20 years now. So, and funding, you know, continues to be a problem. So we'll see, I guess, where that goes to in the future. I'm hoping it'll get better at some point, where hopefully, you know, smaller businesses or even larger, you know, public businesses will get involved. I know back in the 90s, there was like 7-Up in Nigeria, where they were involved a lot in sponsorship, but now it's, you know, a lot dependent on government or, you know, some outside sponsors that, you know, don't always come through. Then the front cover of the same issue, a wrestler I was not familiar with, but seeing this definitely piques my interest. Baba Mutum. Looks like he was a Nigerian sumo wrestler who was also involved in the pro scene. Competed in sumo in Japan apparently at one point, and, you know, then took his trade into the pro rings in Nigeria. I'd love to find some footage of him. I've never seen really like big, massive super heavyweights like that in, you know, African wrestling. So I would love to see, you know, what that style is like and how they perform in the pro ring. You know, a couple more interesting articles from this 2003 April issue. The masked wrestler down here at the bottom, Boa Showman from East Africa. Who is he? Never heard of him, never seen him. Seems like a mystery man. We have a profile on tag team wrestling in Nigeria from the 70s and 80s, which that is very interesting to me. So definitely something I'll be reading. All right, and the last issue of Wrestling Update that I received here, December 2003. This one kind of follows up on Pat Vaughn, who I'd mentioned he left for South Africa, apparently passed away soon after. Really tragic to see. We have Power Udi in a cover story, which is always interesting. Here we have mention of NWA Nigeria. They were not, you know, related. It was the National Wrestling Alliance of Nigeria, NWAN, but it was not an official territory of Nigeria. It was run by Elefando Bassi, who is now working as the ring announcer in Nigeria Pro Wrestling Federation and has been a trainer in Nigerian pro wrestling for years. You know, obviously a competitor, a promoter. He's one of the legends of Nigerian pro wrestling. We also have a profile of Ariba Swan, who has been mentioned a couple times in this issue. What a great look here. Almost reminds me of Flava Flav. Take a look at that hat that he's wearing, got those title belts. Probably a great personality in the history of Nigerian pro wrestling for sure. And we also have a feature on women's wrestling in Nigeria. Very interesting, still going strong today. I believe there's only, you know, 3 to 5 female wrestlers right now in Nigeria, but it's good to see that they've, you know, really always kept up with the tradition of women's wrestling. Maybe even more so, you know, than the Western world did during, you know, early 2000s when, you know, the WWE women's division was, I don't know, what, divas and bra and panties matches, and, you know, WCW really didn't have much of a women's division to speak of. You know, I think they made some of the Nitro girls wrestle at one point, but, you know, these are trained female wrestlers that, you know, putting on women's matches at a majority of Nigeria's wrestling events. The December 2003 issue also has a profile of classic Colt Cabana very early on in his career. Interesting bio, I did read through it, you know, shouting out his trainer Ace Steel, who, you know, we know that they don't necessarily have a great relationship now, and, you know, he talks about dedication and discipline, that kind of stuff, and it's funny to see, you know, that he would later go on to kind of embrace comedy wrestling a little bit more. In this profile, it doesn't sound like a guy that's a comedy wrestler necessarily, but, you know, it's interesting just to see the evolution of one's career, and I do wonder if Colt even knows that he was featured in Nigeria's Wrestling Update in December 2003, you know, especially because he's had guys come on his podcast and talk about their trips to Nigeria. Well, you know, Colt apparently was a known wrestler in Nigeria in the early 2000s. And that kind of wraps up the Wrestling Update stuff that I wanted to share. Definitely check those out though. There's so much in there to read. Great historical record, like I said. I have a lot to read from those still, and they're going to be really helpful in building, you know, title histories, you know, just history in general. And just the last thing I wanted to mention, this award that I received, this was back in 2001. I received it in absentia in Yaoundé, Cameroon, as part of the Battle of Yaoundé 2021. It took a while to get here, of course, you know, traveling from Cameroon. We have this kind of big plaque. It means so much to me, though. I mean, I've already posted about this online, and I don't need to get into, you know, all the extreme details and, you know, the emotions and all that again. You know, I've already done it enough, so you can read what I posted about that in the past. And of course, there is a link to, you know, my tweet about this on the scans page that I mentioned. So if you do follow up and you want to check out some scans, there's a little bit of information on this poster, or on this award too. It made its way here finally after, you know, being with Olusegun in Nigeria. You know, he brought it home with him from Cameroon. The Wolf NDA actually accepted this on my behalf, which was super cool because I think he's an awesome wrestler, and you know, it's great to see him kind of making his way in the US now. But then this was also brought back to Cameroon this past summer when Pro Wrestling Africa held a couple events there, and it was handed off to the Golden Boy, Jimmy McDowell, who was the first American wrestler to ever wrestle in Cameroon. He was given this award to mail back to me, along with, you know, all of the newspapers, show posters, all that. And I'm so appreciative that he was able to do that and send that over to me in the mail, because this stuff means so much to me, especially this award. Like, I need to build a wrestling office just to put this on display. I just think it's so cool, you know. It has my name, my picture, you know, Pro Wrestling Africa. It gives me a little shout out for, you know, what it's being presented for. And I guess I'll read that, because I haven't read that in, you know, any of the tweets or anything. So it says, in recognition and appreciation of his absolute commitment and dedication to the development and growth of the African professional wrestling, and for the upliftment of the sport around the world through the media. So really cool. I'm so proud of it. I'm sorry that I've bragged about it so much, but this is probably the coolest thing that I've ever gotten in terms of, you know, anything pro wrestling. So thanks for checking this out. I hope you like this unboxing style video. I know it's not usually what we do, but I think it's had a little bit of a mix in of some of the history and African wrestling and you know, stuff that you wouldn't see elsewhere, pro wrestling stuff that no one else is talking about. And you know, I hope you'll check out those scans, and I hope you'll check out WrestleMap.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You know, more videos coming for sure. I have a history of Congolese wrestling coming soon. Some other cool stuff coming down the pipes too, so definitely subscribe, check us out, WrestleMap.com. And I'm Brian, thanks for sticking around and checking this out with me.